had imagined my 40th birthday unfolding differently, a quiet evening with close friends, sharing stories, laughter, and perhaps a simple supper. A celebration that felt genuine, intimate. Instead, I found myself in my own home, surrounded by strangers and insincere smiles. A mere afterthought at an event that was supposed to be mine. The moment I stepped inside and took in the extravagant decor, the cascading champagne, the fine dining laid out like an offering to the gods of excess, I knew. This wasn't my party. It was Samantha's. Or rather, it was his. Damon Carter. There he stood, commanding attention near the grand piano, his perfectly tailored suit draping effortlessly over his broad frame, his teeth flashing in an immaculate grin that reeked of arrogance. He spoke with the ease of a man accustomed to admiration, and he received it in abundance. Some worshipped him, drawn to the power he exuded. Others, like me, saw him for what he truly was, a fraud. A man who built his empire not on brilliance but on deception, weaving a web of lies so seamless that even those entangled within it mistook it for security. I had my suspicions about Samantha for months. The late-night text messages she tried too hard to hide. The business meetings that always seemed to require her to look just right. The way she smiled at me when I asked too many questions. Just enough to placate but never enough to reassure. I had no proof. Until tonight. I watched her now. The way her posture shifted when Damon entered the room. The way her eyes softened. Her laugh came a little too easily. Her fingertips brushed his arm with an intimacy she had long forgotten to show me. And as Damon lifted his glass, flashing that insufferable smirk, I knew what was coming before he even spoke. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, his voice smooth, practiced. The same voice that had lured countless investors into his schemes. A ripple of anticipation spread through the crowd as all eyes turned to him. I held his gaze as he continued. To the struggle beneath the surface, to the fight for success, where only a select few truly rise to the top. A few polite chuckles. My fingers tightened around my whiskey glass. And to those who try and fail. Silence. Nervous laughter. Eyes darting between us. Unwilling to linger too long on my face. And Samantha? She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't deny it. My jaw clenched. But I didn't react. Not in the way he expected. Instead, I let a slow, deliberate smile stretch across my lips. And for the first time, I saw something flicker in Damon's eyes. Uncertainty. I leaned in slightly. Just enough to let my voice carry to him alone. "I bet." Then I set my glass down, adjusted my suit jacket, and walked away. There was no need for a scene. No need for a fight. Because Damon Carter had already lost. I pulled my phone from my pocket and made a single call. The line rang once. Twice. Then a voice, smooth and interested, answered. Listening. The boardroom was a masterpiece of sleek glass and steel. A temple of power built for those who knew how to wield it. At its head sat Maitland Crawford. Not just an investor, but a force of nature. A woman who made kings. And who could just as easily unmake them. She tapped her manicured nails against the polished table, watching as I placed my briefcase before her. "Let's hear it, Nathan." I clicked it open. Inside, neat stacks of documents. Emails. Reports. Bank statements. The kind of proof that didn't just accuse, it convicted. She leaned forward, curiosity sharpening her gaze. Damon Carter built his empire on deception, I said, my voice smooth, controlled. He doesn't invest. He manipulates. Moves money between companies, inflating stock prices like a magician with a cheap trick. A Ponzi scheme in everything but name. She didn't react, at least not outwardly. But I caught the slight shift in her posture, the barely perceptible tension. More importantly, I continued. He's been using your name. That got her attention. I tapped my iPad, and a recording crackled to life. Damon's voice filled the room. Do you know what it means that Crawford is backing this project? It means there's no risk. She never loses. And neither will you. Maitland's lips pressed into a thin line. I tapped again, displaying offshore accounts. A paper trail so damning it would burn every bridge Damon had ever built. She exhaled slowly. That's a serious accusation. I leaned back, meeting her gaze. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Silence stretched between us. Then, without a word, she reached for her phone. One call to the board. One call to the authorities. And just like that, Damon Carter's empire crumbled. 24 hours ago, they had laughed at me in my own home. Tonight the celebration was mine. I stood in my kitchen, sipping bourbon, the glow of my phone screen illuminating the headline. Carter Global under federal investigation. I glanced toward the living room. Damon was still there, lounging in his chair, whiskey in hand, Samantha by his side. He had no idea. Yet. I almost feel bad for Nathan, he mused, swirling his drink. The man just doesn't have what it takes to make it. I took another slow sip, then stepped into the room. The moment Damon saw my face, his smirk wavered. I tapped my phone. The news report flashed onto the massive TV screen. Breaking. CEO Damon Carter under federal investigation. Silence crashed over the party. Damon's face drained of color. He bolted upright, reaching for his phone, only to see the flood of texts, missed calls, emails. His world was collapsing in real time. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Enjoy tonight, D, I murmured. Because tomorrow, you're going to regret this party. And then I turned and walked away. Samantha called after me. I didn't stop. By the time the sun rose, Damon Carter's empire would be nothing but rubble. And for the first time in years I felt alive. I love you, I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. I truly did. But you ceased to be my wife the moment you chose him. Samantha took a step back, as though the weight of my words had physically struck her. Her eyes, once filled with defiance, now shimmered with something else. Regret, perhaps, or the slow, painful realization that she had gambled everything and lost. You weren't just unfaithful, I continued, my voice quieter now but no less cutting. You were unkind. Her lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled in my eyes. Not for her, but for the years I had spent giving everything to a woman who had only ever seen me as a stepping stone to something better. I took a breath, nodded slightly and turned away. I didn't pause. I didn't look back. Because for the first time in years, I no longer belonged to her. I belonged to my future. Damon Carter was no longer a titan of industry, no longer the golden boy of high finance. When the headlines broke, his name was smeared across every major news outlet. He wasn't just disgraced, he was ruined. His arrest came swiftly, his fraudulent empire crumbling in real time under the weight of the investigations I had set in motion. Within 24 hours, his accounts were frozen. Within 48 hours, his investors began to pull out one by one, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. By the end of the week, he was nothing. A man who once held court in lavish ballrooms, who raised his glass to my failures and smirked at my misfortune, was now a cautionary tale. And Samantha, she had been right there beside him, standing at his side as he ridiculed me, replacing me without a second thought. But whispers travel fast in the world she so desperately wanted to belong to. Once she was admired, envied. Now no one wanted to be associated with her. The invitation stopped. The doors she once waltzed through so effortlessly were now firmly shut. Samantha Donovan had placed the wrong bet. I knew she had been trying to reach me. Calls, messages, even an email with a desperate subject line. We need to talk. But there was nothing left to say. She had already said everything when she stood by his side instead of mine. For 12 years, I had given her my love, my loyalty, my unwavering devotion. And when life got hard, she left, convinced she had found someone better. Now she was alone. So when my phone rang again that night, I wasn't surprised. I didn't even have to check the caller ID. I already knew. This time I answered. Her voice was small, trembling. Nathan. I leaned back against the cool glass of my hotel suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out over the glittering skyline. The city stretched before me, full of possibilities of new beginnings. Could you please just... She trailed off, took a shaky breath. I smirked. Talk. She exhaled, the humiliation thick in her silence. I need to explain. Explain. I repeated, amused. Please. Elaborate. She hesitated, then her voice cracked. I didn't know this would happen. A cold laugh escaped me. Of course you didn't, I murmured. You thought you had it all figured out. You thought Damon would take care of you. That you'd live in luxury while I wasted away in my failures. She said nothing, because she knew I was right. You were fine seeing me treated like an outsider in my own home, I continued. Fine with humiliating me in front of our friends. But now that your golden ticket is gone, now you want to talk. Her voice cracked. Nathan, I leaned forward slightly, my tone unwavering. No, Samantha. You made a choice. And now you have to live with it. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable, waiting for her to whisper that I had lost everything. But I hadn't. She had. She had wanted wealth, prestige, a life of grandeur. She had gambled on a man she thought was powerful, a man who could give her everything. And she had lost. Nathan, she said hesitantly, voice thick with something that might have been sorrow. I was supposed to have everything I ever deserved. But now I don't know where to go. What to do. Please just tell me. I tilted my head, a small smile curving my lips. Figure it out. And then I hung up. For years, I had felt trapped in my own marriage, burdened by Samantha's expectations, constantly trying to prove my worth to a woman who had already decided I would never be enough. But I didn't fail. And now, nothing was holding me back. Samantha and Demond had dug their own graves. I was finally free. With my divorce finalized, I turned my focus to the one thing I had ignored for too long, myself. My startup, once struggling, had found new life. And Maitland Crawford, the woman who had stood by my side when no one else did, saw something worth investing in. Days after Demond's downfall, she had told me, "Your company had potential. You just never had the right support." She was right. And with her help, I built something Demond never could. A business. A reputation. A future. And it was mine. The man they once ridiculed for never succeeding was now a self-made millionaire. And the best part, Demond wasn't even around to see it. Samantha had spent years thriving in luxury, ensuring she remained at the top no matter who she had to step over. But after Demond's arrest, she had nothing. No mansion. No designer clothes. No elite social circle. She went from being adorned in diamonds to struggling to pay rent. A year later, I stepped out of a sleek black car, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored suit. A year ago, I wouldn't have even made the guest list. Now, I was a primary sponsor of the biggest corporate gala of the year. As I entered, CEOs, investors, and industry giants nodded in recognition. I was one of them now. And then across the room I saw her. Samantha stood near the back, out of place in a way she never had been before. The arrogance, the superiority gone. Her designer dresses, her jewelry, the effortless elegance she once carried herself with gone. She hesitated before approaching me. "Nathan," she whispered. I turned slightly, swirling the ice in my whiskey. "You look different," she murmured. I smirked. "So do you." She swallowed hard, shifting under my gaze. I didn't think you'd be here." I raised an eyebrow. "And yet here you are." Her eyes darted away. "I wasn't invited." I chuckled. "Ah, sneaking in then." She didn't respond. I watched her fidget, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "Nathan," she breathed, voice shaking. "I made a mistake." I leaned in slightly. "Do you regret choosing Demond?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I do. A year ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Now, they meant nothing. For years, I had tried to be enough for her. And she had thrown it all away." I tilted my head, met her gaze one last time. "Look where that got you." She winced but didn't argue. "Are you happy?" she finally asked. For the first time in years, I didn't measure my happiness by her standards. I measured it by my own. And I smiled. "I've never been happier." She nodded slightly, as if she had been expecting that answer. And then she turned and walked away. And for the first time in my life, I let her go.